Are the Atlanta Falcons about to make one of the most expensive mistakes in NFL history? Or is cutting Kirk Cousins the only way to salvage what's left of their championship window? We're witnessing one of the most bizarre quarterback situations in recent memory, where a team is potentially preparing to eat $180 million in guaranteed money just 1 year after handing out that massive contract. The Atlanta Falcons find themselves in an unprecedented predicament that could define their franchise for years to come, and the solution might be as painful as it is necessary. Let's dive into how we got here and why cutting Kirk Cousins might be the only way forward for a franchise desperate to compete while they still have a window. Just over a year ago, the Atlanta Falcons thought they had solved their quarterback problem. Kirk Cousins, coming off a devastating Achilles injury but with a track record consistent production, seemed like the perfect bridge to help Atlanta take the next step toward playoff contention. The 4-year, $180 million contract was massive, but it represented the Falcons' commitment to winning now rather than waiting for another rebuild. Then came the NFL draft, and everything changed. With the 8th overall pick, Atlanta selected Michael Penix Jr. from Washington, a move that shocked the football world and immediately raised questions about the organization's long-term planning. How do you justify spending $180 million on a quarterback and then use your first-round pick on his potential replacement just months later? At the time, the Falcons insisted that Penix was a developmental pick, someone who could learn behind Cousins for a few years before eventually taking over. It was a reasonable explanation, but it ignored one crucial factor. What happens if the expensive veteran doesn't perform up to expectations? That's exactly what happened in 2024. Cousins' return from injury was far from smooth, and his performance on the field raised serious questions about whether he could still be the quarterback Atlanta needed him to be. Throwing 16 interceptions, the worst mark in the league, while struggling with mobility and decision-making, Cousins looked every bit like a quarterback whose best days were behind him. The decision to bench Cousins in favor of Penix late in the season wasn't just about giving the rookie experience. It was about acknowledging that their $180 million investment wasn't working out as planned. And now, heading into 2025, the Falcons find themselves with the most expensive backup quarterback in NFL history. This is where Gary Davenport's analysis from Bleacher Report hits the nail on the head. We're looking at a three-way game of chicken between the Falcons, Cousins, and the rest of the NFL, and nobody wants to blink first. Atlanta desperately wants to move Cousins and his $27.5 million guaranteed salary, but they can't find any takers. Other teams know they can wait and potentially get Cousins for nothing if Atlanta cuts him rather than paying that massive salary for a backup. The exploration of trade possibilities has yielded nothing, which isn't surprising given Cousins' performance in 2024 and his age. Why would any team trade assets and take on that contract when they could simply wait for Atlanta to release him? It's basic economics, and the Falcons are learning a harsh lesson about leverage in NFL negotiations. This leaves Atlanta in an impossible position. They can't trade Cousins. They can't justify paying him $27.5 million to hold a clipboard, and they can't afford to keep him on the roster if it prevents them from making other moves to improve the team. The concept of sunk cost becomes crucial here, that $180 million is already spent, and keeping Cousins around just to justify the initial investment will be throwing good money after bad. The psychological aspect of the situation can't be ignored either. If Penix struggles early in the season, there will inevitably be calls to give Cousins another chance. That kind of quarterback controversy is toxic to a locker room and can derail an entire season. Having Cousins on the bench creates a built-in distraction that could undermine Penix's development and the team's chemistry. But here's the thing that makes the situation even more complex. Cousins might actually still have something left in the tank. His struggles in 2024 could have been related to his recovery from the Achilles injury, rust from time off, or simply adjusting to a new system. There's a non-zero chance that Cousins could bounce back and be effective for another team, which makes the decision to cut him even more painful for Atlanta. The Falcons were probably hoping for exactly what Davenport mentions, an injury to another team's starting quarterback that would create a market for Cousins' services. Teams like the Los Angeles Rams, who are dealing with Matthew Stafford's back issues, could suddenly find themselves in need of veteran quarterback help. But banking on other teams' misfortune is a dangerous game, and it's not a strategy you can build your roster construction around. The reality is that if Penix proves he can be the guy, and early indications suggest he has that potential, then Cousins becomes completely expendable. At that point, every dollar spent on Cousins is a dollar that could be used to surround Penix with better weapons, improve the defense, or address other roster needs. The irony of this entire situation is that it might actually work out for the Falcons in the long run. If Penix develops into a franchise quarterback, then the pain of cutting Cousins becomes a distant memory. Sometimes the best decisions are the ones that hurt the most in the short term but pay dividends down the road. The bottom line is this. The Falcons created this mess by signing Cousins and then drafting Penix, but they shouldn't compound the mistake by keeping both quarterbacks on the roster out of stubbornness or pride. The $180 million is already spent. The question now is whether they're willing to cut their losses and move forward with their future rather than clinging to a past that clearly isn't working. What do you think the Falcons should do with Kirk Cousins? Is cutting the right move, or should they hold on to him as insurance for Penix? Drop your thoughts in the comments and hit that like button if you think Atlanta needs to bite the bullet and move on from their expensive mistake.